So let's come in here into the PDF to start with and talk about quantitative data. So we originally we started on the last part. We talked a little bit about qualitative or categorical data. Now we're going to talk about quantitative data, and quantitative data is going to be something that's a number, and not just a number, but it's going to represent something that was counted or measured. So quantitative data is going to be something that was counted or measured. Let's take a look in our map that we're working on. And let's go ahead and take a look at the Wolfpack attribute table. We'll right click there and then go up to attribute table. And so if we look at, I'm going to hit this pin to minimize the symbology pane. And if I look here at the attribute table, we do have a few of these fields are numbers. So which ones would be quantitative and which ones would be categorical or qualitative? Well, the feature ID, the FID, those are all numbers, but do they represent something that was measured about the wolf pack? No, it was just a number that was assigned. So because it doesn't represent something that was measured or counted, this is still qualitative or categorical data, and it's not, the feature ID is nothing that you would ever symbolize based on, because it's just a number that's assigned by the software. We've got an object ID, and that is also that this just shows that at one point that right now this is a shape file, and at one point it was a feature class. Don't worry about that sometimes. Don't worry about that too much. But if you ever see FID, OID, or object ID, those aren't fields that you're going to symbolize on. We have the pack name. Is that going to be categorical or quantitative? Qualitative or quantitative? I ask this, give you a minute to answer. That's just a qualitative or a categorical. That's just a name someone gave it. So that doesn't, the year is not something that's counted or measured, but it is. I guess it is. It's just in discrete jumps, one at a time. So that could be quantitative. You can kind of actually use that one either way, honestly. Pack ID, that's just, is that something, is the pack ID something that was counted or measured? Now, even though it's a number, it wasn't counted, it wasn't measured, it's just the number that's assigned to the pack. So it's kind of random. So it's just a number that Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife assigned to the pack. So that's not really quantitative. And then we've got pack status, and we know that that's a category or a qualitative data because we just used it to symbolize something. So we looked through that and we see that there's really not anything quantitative that's too great for this. All right, so let's go ahead and close that attribute table, and we want to focus on how to symbolize things that are quantitative, that are measured or counted. And so we are going to go into our catalog here. And we're going to go into our student workbook data, okay, so the data you downloaded to work on here. And we've got a folder called Spokane Demographics. Now your folder is going to look a little bit different than mine because as we move through these demonstrations, I add data to the student workbook data, so it's not complete yet because we're only in section 4. But go ahead and look at the data that you downloaded to use with the workbook, and you should find a folder called Spokane Demographics. We're going to use some of this data because we've got some really good quantitative stuff in here that's fun to work with. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on that and we're going to add it to the project. So we're going to add the whole folder to our project from our favorites, and our favorites is going to be the student workbook data should be in our favorites. So now we go back to the project, and like I mentioned when we talked about file management all the way back earlier, that's kind of one of the keys to GIS, right? Is that you've got to figure out where your files are, where you've saved things. So if your student workbook data is somewhere else, if it's somewhere on your computer, go ahead and find it and add it to the project. So you might need to pause me and take a minute, but you're going to add from your student workbook data, you're going to add the Spokane Demographics folder, okay? So when that's done, we meet back here. Look at all these folders I have. I'm going to close close some of these up, but if I just look at my folders, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 folders connected to my project now. And so we've got the, this map seems like it's pretty nice with just the wolf packs on it, this Washington overview. I don't want to add anything else to muddy it up. We could add, we're going to look at some demographics in the city of Spokane. We could add those to this map here, but honestly, that's going to kind of muddy this one up, and we had some fun practicing with bookmarks here. So I think it's time to add a new map to this project. So I want you to go ahead and see if you can do that without following me to start with. So I want you to add a new map to this project. You can pause me and do that. Obviously, I'm going to do it right now. So I'm going to add a new map. Here we go. New map. Boom. And it's just going to open up. If we didn't want to have all 3 maps going on in this project right now, we could close a couple of them, but we're going to be going back and forth between them, so I'm going to keep them open. This new map, let's give it a name like I just double clicked there on the title of the map. Oh, I didn't want the symbology. I want my catalog. That's where my demographics data is. So I'll just go ahead and pin this so it doesn't disappear on us again or hide. I'm going to open that folder. I'm going to open demographics geodatabase, and then I want to go ahead and use the Spokane family poverty. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and pull it onto the map. And what you see right here is it looks really stretched out east to west, and that's because this is census data that's in, and we haven't learned about coordinate systems yet because I don't want to overwhelm you with that information to start things up. Maybe I should have. That's coming in a week or two. But without teaching you about coordinate systems, I can't explain well why this is all stretched east to west. But I can tell you that you can tell the coordinate system is off if things are stretched east to west like this. I'm going to have you fix that, and it's because the map takes on the coordinate system of whatever the first layer you add to it is, and this is apparently in a geographic coordinate system, which, don't worry about that. All that will make sense to you in 2 weeks, okay? But we're going to fix it by right-clicking on demographics and going to properties. So you'll learn about this, and we're going to go down to the coordinate system. Just humor me and follow along with me, and you will learn all the why very soon, okay? And we're going to go to a projected coordinate system. You will learn what that is very soon, so just follow along with me. Luckily, it's a video, so you can pause, and we're going to go down to UTM here. So that's under projected coordinate systems. We're going to go down to UTM. We're going to choose NAD 1983 from this whole list of things that have no meaning to you now, but they will in a couple weeks. And we're going to choose Zone 11. You're like, what? Zone 11? Yeah, Zone 11. That's the one we want, okay? I'm sorry about that. I feel like it's hard to throw something that's completely foreign at you, but just necessary today. And my heart feels better because now this actually looks like the right shape for Spokane. So I can't stand working on a map that's not in a coordinate system that is valid for that area. It's just a pet peeve. So we fixed that. Teacher's happy. You're happy. You'll learn about coordinate systems here in another week or two, okay? It's just something that's deep enough. I like to get us a little into the quarter and having some fun before we get into it. Okay. All right. So now we're here. We've got our Spokane family poverty going on. So that's great. And before we symbolize anything, we want to take a look at the attribute table. So let's right click on the layer and go to attribute table. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit the pin on the catalog so that gets out of the way. It's still there. It's just tucked out of the way. And census data, demographic data is rich, which means that the attribute table is out of control. All right, so we've got all sorts of things. We'll start with the object ID, which every feature class has. We've got a shape. These are polygons. This is the state code, And the state code for Washington is 53. The Census Bureau gives us a code. Then we have a county code. The county code for Spokane County is 63. Then we've got tract numbers. We've got GeoID numbers. We've got names for the tracts. We've got another like full-on name. I don't know what MTFCC is. We've got Funk Stats. I'm not sure what that is. We've got area of land and area of water within each of the census tracts. So area of land and area of water within each of the census tracts. And that looks to be in square feet. We've got the latitude and longitude, kind of the center of each tract. Oh my goodness. We've got a secondary ID number. We've got, then these are some specialized numbers that help the tracts match with specific data that the Census Bureau collected. So that's a number that helps us match with the right tract. And then this is another number that helps us match with the right tract. Oh my goodness. And then we've got the name for these tracts. And if you pull these out, you can kind of read the whole attribute name. But these come from spreadsheets. That's why they have that CSV in them. Okay, now we're going to get into the meat here. We're going to work in this layer kind of for a bunch of time in this demonstration, so I want us to be comfortable with it. Basically, what we have here is the total number of children in each census tract, the number of children that live in their home. So if, like, let's say you were surveyed and you had 3 or 4 children, but one of them or 2 of them were at boarding school, you would count your children in your census tract, but they wouldn't be living in the home right now. So this is the total number of children and the children in the home. For the most part, for pretty much all of our tracts, those match. Okay, we've got the number of children under 3 years, that are 3 and 4 years old, that are 5 years old, 6 to 8, 9 to 11, 12 to 14, 15 to 17, and then institutionalized. So if you had a child like that had really heavy like special needs and couldn't live at home and had to live in a hospital setting, they would be in an institution. That might even count if you had like a child who was in juvenile detention. But most of our tracts that no children are institutionalized. Then we've got a couple more ID numbers that help us match the tracts with our data. And again, that geographic number. And then we're getting into more fields. So census data is really fun to work with, but it's kind of a bear. But let's just go ahead and jump right into it. You'll be using this data on some assignments too later, so it's nice to just read through it together. We've got the total households in the census tract. And then this is the number of households that fall under the poverty line. Okay, so these are all poverty households added up. So these are all the households. And then these are the households that are earn money below the poverty threshold. All right, we've all been there, haven't we? Right? Well, maybe not, but some of us have, right? It's rough. Glad to not be there right now. Then we've got those households that are married couples, and so the total households, the households that are married couples. Then we've got married under 5 years, married for 5 years, married for 6 to 17 years. Then we've got households that have adults in them that are not married. So those are all households that are not married. We've got ones that are made up of a man with no wife, and then the children living there, and then a female with no husband, and then the children living there and their age breakdown. And then we've got the shape length and shape area, and those represent the size of the census tracts, and those must be in a geographic coordinate system, because those are no good for areas or lengths. Okay, so I thought we would probably, for the most part, take a look at the total number of houses. Oh no, what was I? Where were we at? Scrolling back and forth here. I wanted to look at total number of households and households in poverty. So let's kind of focus there. So quantitative data. We've got numbers and they were counted. These are people. So quantitative data. Let's take a look back at our workbook here. So quantitative quantitative data includes numbers that were measured or counted. Okay? All right. And so quantitative data in the attributes table. Yes, we just looked at that for the census data. So sometimes the figures in the workbook are just like what we're working in the demonstration. Sometimes they display something different, but in this case they display something the same. So we can use quantitative data to symbolize in a few different ways. Let's take a look at those and let's pull them up. Okay. So I want to take a look at total households and households in poverty. So I'm familiar now with the headings for those attributes, those fields. Here, the field headings or the attribute headings. I'm familiar with those, so I know that I can find them again. I'm going to go ahead and close this because it takes up a lot of space. I'm going to go to my symbology. And rather than single symbol, so this is what it looks like if I've got a single symbol representing things. Not too exciting, right? I'm not going to go to unique values because I'm not looking at categorical data. I'm looking at quantitative data. So I don't want to look at categorical ways to symbolize. I want to look at quantitative ways. Graduated colors is one of my favorites and one of the most useful ways to symbolize data. And what you're going to see here, I'm going to go ahead and pin my symbology pane down so it stays put. This is the field that this is being symbolized on, and right now that's area of land. Like, pretty much, I cannot think of a reason to ever symbolize something based on area of land. Let me tell you why. You can look at the map and roughly tell how big something is. You don't need a special color for the size of something. So don't ever symbolize something on area of land because that's silly. You can actually see it on the map. We're going to symbolize this based on a quantitative field, and we're going to look at the poverty households, and we're going to take those poverty households, and what we see here now is we can see the different number of households in each census tract, okay? And that's great. That's kind of exciting, isn't it? But what I want you to notice is that the size of the census tracts varies quite a bit. Like, this one here, I think this is probably like Latah Valley along Hangman Creek through here, because one thing to note, because these are opaque polygons, I can't actually see the base map underneath, and we're going to deal with that at some point, right? But right now we're just kind of messing around. Just wanted to point that out. So this is really big. This census tract takes me all the way out almost to the Air Force Base. So this is a lot of Airway Heights kind of area, or at least partially, kind of south of the Highway 2. So some of these are big and some of these are pretty small tracts. Like, look at this little tract over here. So the idea is you'd probably have fewer people living in a small tract. So if we just look at straight up the number of households in poverty, that doesn't give us that great of a picture because some of the tracts are bigger and they should just include more households in general. And some of them are smaller, they're going to include fewer households. So what I'm going to do is called normalization. And basically I'm just setting up a fraction. So if I take I'm setting up a fraction, and basically it's going to be this field here, whatever I put in here, divided by this field here. When we normalize a field, we divide it by another attribute, we divide it by another field. So I'm going to take the number of houses in poverty and divide it by the total number of houses in that census tract. So watch this. Total households. So what I'm doing is I'm dividing the number of households in poverty by the total number of households. And so what that gives me is a fraction. It's basically the fraction of the households that are in poverty. We can turn a fraction into a percent, can't we? If you took my math class, if you're taking my math class, you know that, right? Or you probably just came into this already knowing that. But we can get a fraction we can get a percent out of a fraction because we're looking at the number of poverty households divided by the total number of households. So that could actually be a percent. So right now we're seeing the fraction, right? The fraction represented as a decimal. But this represents the percent or the proportion of households in poverty. And what you can see is we've got some concentrations of households in poverty. and it looks kind of west central and downtown. And then we've got some more kind of coming up here north. We're going to talk a little bit about this. Right now we're kind of in symbolization. There's a bunch of stuff we can do, but I just wanted to kind of point that out to start as we kind of now that we normalized this, we can actually get a percent. So pretty much for when you're working with census data especially, but when you're working with data that's area limited, you want to go ahead and divide it or normalize it so that you're looking more at a proportion of percent, because that's kind of more real for us to see. What else did I want to tell you? Well, let's go ahead, and these labels are harder to read. What I'd like to do is see this as a percent, because when you've got a really long decimal, it's kind of hard to read and understand. So this is something you're going to end up doing again and again, and it's a little bit like cryptic. Like it takes you wouldn't know to do this unless I showed you. And that is, I want to change these labels so that they are easier to read, so that instead of being a decimal, they're a percent. I'm going to go up here, and it's called the Advanced Symbology Options, and it's going to let me set the labels in a tidy sort of way. Okay, so follow along with me. You'll probably need to do this a few times before it sticks in your head, but I'm coming up here, and then I'm going to go to Format Labels, and rather than being numeric, these are percentage, and then the number doesn't already represent a percent. The number represents a fraction right now. So I'm going to say it represents a fraction. And then how many decimal places do you really want? For percent of households in poverty, I don't really think I need any decimals. They're not, I don't have that kind of precision. And then, so that should look good. Now I can go back here to my primary symbology. This is where we live most of the time, but if I need to tidy things up. And so now I've got labels here. Okay, I've got labels here. So now I'm like, okay, so our census tracts with the least poverty have up to 7% of households are in poverty. And our census tracts with the most poverty have up to 86%. So these are basically 49 to 86%. That means that in these tracts, over half of households are living in poverty. Okay, so that's something, all right? Okay, so we took a look at that. Let's jump back here to our workbook. So quantitative data, numbers that were measured or counted, graduated colors. So basically what we just did is we set up a graduated colors symbolization. A couple things to show you. So we got the labels to line up with percent. Normalization is important. So I want you guys to, whenever you're using graduated colors, I want you to ask yourself the question, should I be normalizing this data? Usually or often the answer is going to be yes. So I want you to think about that. And when you normalize something, you're taking the field that you're symbolizing it by and you're dividing it by another field. Okay, so whatever field you use for normalization is the one that you're dividing that by. So we've got the number of households in poverty divided by the total number of households. That gives us the percent of households in poverty. Okay, and you'll see that division shows up here in the label. Okay. And then I showed you how to change the labels. But a couple other tricks here. The color scheme. Just like with the unique values, you can set up a color scheme. Here's what you should know. From fewer to greater, from less to more, we go from light to darker. Or from less saturated to more saturated. From pale to rich. So less is light, less is pale, less is faded, and more or greater is going to be darker or brighter. So you can see that in this color ramp. So our census tracts with less poverty are light colored. Our census tracts with more poverty are a richer, darker, brighter color. And so when you look at your color ramps, that's what you want to be looking for. Would this color ramp make sense? How do you interpret that? Well, you can look at the legend and carefully follow through it, but that doesn't make sense for a less to more. So you want to choose a color ramp that makes sense for less to more if that's what you're symbolizing. And in general, it's going to be less confusing if you stick with colors in the same family or even the same color. Like here's a color ramp that goes from less to more, and it goes from white, pale green, darker green. Okay, so that's staying with the same color. That works, and it's less confusing for your viewer. So much to talk about. Again, a less to more. Now it's purple. So those are great ones to look for. Red kind of gives a sense of kind of danger and unease, I feel like, which I feel like poverty should kind of give us that sense or feeling, right? There's people that are having a rough time. But what you probably, like I already showed you what you probably shouldn't do, like something like that, it has no meaning, okay? You could also, right, you could set one of these, and then you could go in and change each color manually, and that could be a pain, but you can absolutely do that as well. Okay, so let's pop into here and graduated colors, what works and what doesn't. Again, this is going to wrap because apparently this fillable PDF was set up a little wonky, so it's not going to wrap. So, but you can watch me type now. What works and what doesn't. Normalize. Ask yourself what makes sense. Okay. Then you want to less is light and more is dark or rich. Often best to stay in the same color. Okay, often, that's with an O. Often best to stay in the same color, okay, or color family. Often or usually or almost always best. Okay, so graduated colors, and remember that graduated colors is for quantitative data. Okay, and there we have it. So we sometimes, like I said, sometimes the demonstration photos are the same as the images in our workbook, and sometimes they're not. It just kind of depends what I'm doing, but in this case it is, so you can kind of see that. So last piece for this segment of the demonstration. When colors are known to the art world as hues. When a color represents the value within a polygon, you have what is known, here's a geographic term, choropleth map. Okay, there's probably a new word for most of you, choropleth. Even the PDF doesn't recognize it as a real world, but choropleth means a map, just like you're seeing here, where the color is a stand-in for quantity. So when we look at yellow means there's 7% or fewer households in poverty. So a color stands in for something that's represented on the ground. Okay, so phenomenon. Those can also be known as, we talked about thematic maps. We're definitely looking at developing a thematic map right now, where we're looking at poverty in Spokane, the census tracts, and what we see as far as the colors represent the intensity of poverty here. Okay, so we will pick this up in the next segment of the demonstration.